Welcome back to Prof E Plays. I'm Prof E, and today we're going to be looking at this is the first in a series of videos that I'm going to do kind of as I feel like I have time on how to solo RPG. There's going to be a combination of some more kind of philosophy-oriented videos, mindset-oriented videos, and practical nuts and bolts style videos. But this one is really about mindset. So the question is finding your why in relation to solo role-playing. So in order to do that, I want us to think some about motivation, both kind of motivation in general and motivation specifically to those that are wanting to play role-playing games and even more specifically, solo role-playing games. And so we're going to look at first intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, what the difference is between these, and then how they apply right to role-playing games. And then we'll look at three different models specifically of player motivation, so we're bringing the game element into it. And finally, look at some implications of this. So, Daniel Pink, in his book Drive, distinguishes between two different types of motivation: extrinsic on the one hand, intrinsic on the other. Now, extrinsic motivation, what defines it is that it is motivation that's driven by some kind of outside source. While intrinsic motivation is driven by the one who is doing the thing and their desire just to do that thing. Right? So, just as simple examples, in my case, right, I play the piano some. And so when I sit down at home and I open up one of my piano books and I just play, and I play just for my own pleasure, that's intrinsic motivation. Now, other times, if, say, a friend of mine knows that I play piano and they need a pianist for their wedding, and this has happened a couple times, like friends or family members will ask me to play at their wedding, I can do that, right? And in this case, it's an extrinsic motivation and that I'm playing for them as effectively as a wedding gift at times, right? So I'm doing something because there's the kind of outside source or benefit that I receive, right? So, and this is something that can apply to role-playing games, right? So specifically solo role-playing games, because this is the kind of thing that we like to do and perhaps record ourselves. Seen my channel, you know I do that, right? So we record ourselves so then people can watch it. Who knows? Maybe certainly some people, some channels have sponsors, for example, and the like, or perhaps use affiliate links. You monetize in some fashion. I haven't done this, at least at the time I'm recording this video. It makes it look too much like work for me. I like to do this for fun, intrinsically motivated, right? Right. So I think it is helpful, though, to understand what each of these is good for. It's what extrinsic motivation is good for is convincing people to do routine tasks that don't necessarily take a lot of thought or creativity. Intrinsic motivation is really good for getting people to do creative tasks that require especially a lot of mental effort of some kind, right? So if you feel like you're hitting a wall with solo role playing, or you don't know where to start or something like that, you need to think about what is it that's causing the problem. Like in my case, what I found was that I stopped solo role playing for a while until I started this channel. And having this channel created in me a sense of extrinsic motivation in that, oh, I need to post another video because people might be looking at it, right? So I'm making these videos not because I get any money from them, I don't get any at all, but because I guess I get the dopamine hit from the views or something like that. Oh, somebody liked a video. Yes, good stuff. Right. So this is an extrinsic motivator. Now, when it comes to what I do while I'm making the videos, though, there I don't particularly care about the content, and that's obvious from the fact that I don't edit at all. Like literally, I don't edit at all. Right. So well, because that doesn't sound fun, so I don't want to do it. Right. So since I only focus on the fun parts, that means in the midst of the making of my videos, playing the games or talking like this, right, then I'm being intrinsically motivated. And that is good because the content of the video often requires a great deal of creativity or mental energy. Right? So you can pair right, extrinsic and intrinsic motivations at times, and that may cover different elements of the activity. So for me, the extrinsic motivation convinces me to sit down and make a video. But the content of the video is more intrinsically motivated. So you want to think about, in your case, what is it that's causing problems? Do you feel like it's a lack of mental energy, in which case it's the intrinsic motivation that's lacking? And sometimes that happens because you have tried to use extrinsic motivation instead to get yourself to be creative. And that doesn't work very well for most people. Or is it the fact that you're having a hard time setting aside to do the thing? Now, that's not something that takes a lot of mental energy necessarily. So it's really just a matter of forcing yourself to do it, in which case you might want to create some form of extrinsic motivation to get you to sit down and make the video. Or that's one form, that's for me what I do, but to get you to sit down and solo roleplay. Now, it might be there are a number of things you can do, right? You can start a YouTube channel like I have, right? Or you can do things like I'm going to make myself a batch of cookies if I sit down and solo roleplay today. These kinds of things. So give yourself something you enjoy doing that you will do after you complete whatever the task is. All right. Let's look more specifically now as we move away from these general categories of motivation to look specifically at player motivation for people that are playing games. So the first model here is the GNS model. This is kind of an old model. I want to say it's at least a good 20 years old at this point. Right, so this is looking specifically at role-playing games and how players approach them and what players hope to get out of role-playing games. And the claim here by GNS theorists is that there are basically three motivations. There's gamism, narrativism, and simulationism. Right? So and at the time that this was popular, again, roughly between 20 and 25 years ago, people would actually call themselves right by one of these if they were familiar with the theory. So you'd say, "Oh, I am a simulationist." Now, in reality, you might have elements of each of these. The gamist is somebody who really wants to win. Right? So you have some kind of win condition in mind that you want to achieve. So I want to beat the big bad, or something like that. A narrativist is really interested in telling a good story. So you want to have things like theme, rising action, a climax, good character motivations, and so on. These are the kinds of things that a narrativist would be concerned about. The simulationist is really interested in exploring perhaps systems or worlds. Right? So, what are the different areas of the world we're in? What are the different factions that are there? How do they interact with each other and with the PCs? That is a simulationist question. Or another type of simulationist question would be how do the game rules, right, affect the kinds of decisions that I'm going to make? That's an exploration kind of question, right? So each of these, right, are things that it might be that like you're a purist on one of these, or it might be that your mood changes. And as your mood changes, you want more of one, less of another. And that is often where I find myself. Well, I really think of myself as very heavily simulationist and that I like the exploration aspect. Um, I nonetheless do at times have more narrativist elements as well, and sometimes gamist elements. Although I will say the gamist elements are somewhat weaker in my particular case. Um, actually kind of like losing a lot of the time. You've seen this if you watch my DCC videos for Dungeon Crawl Classics. I started with a rather large number of characters, and half of them have been wiped out, and I was perhaps somewhat gleeful as this was happening. Because that's an interesting result, right? So that's the kind of thing a narrativist or simulationist, depending on how they think of it, may find this to be very fun. A gamist would tend to find it very frustrating. So that would kind of get to this distinction. Yep. So let's go on then to the next model. So model number two is the Bartle model. So the Bartle model is very similar in some ways, kind of overlaps with the GNS model, but it suggests a different organizing principle. And that is that there are two spectrums that affect how people approach a game. Now, this would include not just role-playing games, but also things like computer games. Actually, this model and the third model that I'm going to talk about in a minute uh, I think I see them more often applied to people talking about role play, not role play gaming, but about computer gaming, but role play gaming happens to also apply. And so focus on the Bartle model. So this suggests a two-dimensional model, where along one dimension is whether players like to act, that is, they act proactively, are trying to do things, right? Or do they like to interact? That is, where the focus is more on interacting. I don't have another word for that. And then the other dimension is the object of that action or interaction. Is it players or is it the world? Right? So These are the four combinations you have. So you have killers like to act and act on other players, right? So this would be somebody that really likes and likes, you know, playing games where there's a lot of conflict between those that are playing the games. Now, in the case of a role-playing game, this would suggest conflict perhaps, right, between the PCs. The PCs might be a team and the GM. Now, certainly we can do this in fun, but in the way that the killer is going to join this game, they really want, in some sense, to win the game through these conflicts that involve other people at the table. Now, on the other hand, you have achievers. Now, achievers are very similar to gamists from the previous slide in that what they really have is certain win conditions they want to achieve. So when you apply this, for example, to something like a video game, these are the people that look for 100% completion. I need to get every single coin in this Mario game or something like that. Right? So what the achievers are really interested in is, again, acting. They're trying to achieve particular goals, but these goals are not particularly related to the other players, they're instead related to the world. Then we have the interactors. Right, so these would be the socializers who are really interested in interacting with other players. So these people are often drawn to things like massively multiplayer online role-playing games or the like, uh, where you are going to be interacting with other people online, right? Or they might, play group games of things like, I don't know, Among Us or say Minecraft servers, right? Where you may have some social component that is going to happen. Now, you tend not to see socializers that much among solo role-playing game role players. It's not a very common motivation for people that are thinking about solo role-playing, but nonetheless, right, it might be. In which case, you can see some of that socialization happening by interacting while you are interacting with yourself in the roles of, say, your PCs and NPCs or something like that. There are people that like to, in effect, talk to themselves this way. And then the last category would be the explorers. The explorers are very similar to the simulationists from the previous slide. So these are ones that like to interact with the world. So they're interested in what is in this world, how does this world work, and that what we mean by world here could include the system, right? So these are different potential motivations. Okay. One more set. Right, so this is Brain Hex. Brain Hex, this is based on, I believe it's some kind of neuroscience or neurochemistry or something like that. So these are various kind of archetypes that come out of that literature, right? So we have the seekers. The seekers are very much like the explorers or the simulationists from before, where what you're really doing is you're trying to figure out how this world works. You like making discoveries about the game world. A survivor is somebody who likes to experience dangerous situations coming at them and get out of it alive. Often survivors are the kind of people that would like to play horror games, right? So here you're not the one creating the risks you're facing, you're simply faced with them, and your goal is to get through them. Now, a daredevil is very similar in some ways to a survivor, but has a slightly different thing that they're aiming for. And that is they want to undertake risk-taking behavior. Right? So they want to do things that might possibly quote unquote them in some way. Okay. All right. So that'd be another one. Another one would be masterminds. So masterminds are really interested in solving puzzles. Then we have conquerors. Conquerors are very similar to the killers from the previous slide. Let's say you're looking to overcome, whether it be an AI type of program, right, or whether it be other players, right? So you're in this to compete and to beat the others. Socializers, obviously exactly the same as in the Bartle model, and then achievers, again, exactly the same as in the Bartle model. So this is really kind of an expanded Bartle model. It adds a few other possibilities because, for example, the Bartle model doesn't have in there anywhere like masterminds, so you're just kind of like solving puzzles, that kind of thing. Nothing similar to that is in that model. So all of these are things that are out there as possible motivations. So think about these different models. Think about the which of these resonate with you as something where you say, yes, like that's the kind of thing that I like to do, that I'd like to get out of a solo role-playing game session. Now, I would note this is something, any particular session may have a different motivation to it, right? So in my case, sometimes when I sit down to a session, I'm really just mentally tired, in which case my mindset is not going to be, okay, let's create a great story right now. No, it takes too much mental energy for me to do that. So instead, I may do something that takes less mental energy. So for me, things like relatively simple combats where I'm not thinking too much about modifiers and the like. Right? So I sit down, I want to go into this room and find a monster and fight that monster because I'm real tired and I can roll the dice on that. Nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with having multiple of these you think kind of apply to you at different times. I think virtually everyone is going to be that way. Okay. So then the next step is once you figure out what your motivation is, and this is something that might take some trial and error, honestly, in that just sit down and do the solo role play, right? Um, and then at the end of it, you need to think about, was this satisfying for me? Did I enjoy this process? And if I didn't, what about it prevented me from enjoying the process? So, and that's going to guide you in the right direction to know where exactly do you fit, right, in these? What combinations of traits are common for you? So, other implications then. So, one thing to think about is your game choice. Now, one of the claims of GNS theory was that certain games lend themselves to certain styles of play. And there was a lot of debate about this and whether it was actually true or not. I think it is actually true, that there are some games that seem just to be written for narrativism. The Powered by the Apocalypse games, so like I have my Monster of the Week series, it's very clear the way that system is designed is that it's designed to create the type of game a narrativist likes to play. So it's designed to ensure that themes are there. It's designed to ensure that you have conflict occurring. You get rising action. It's not perfectly built in exactly, but it kind of does have that in certain elements, right? So that is something that you need to think about. Is like, is the system that I'm using something that is going to facilitate what I want to do in terms of what my motivation is, what I'm trying to aim for as far as that goes? Then we have things like your own play style. So, are you going to play a hex crawl where you are randomly determining what's in each hex as you go? If you are somebody who's a simulationist, a what was it, a seeker, an explorer, this might be an awesome style of play for you. If you are a narrativist or a gamist, this may be terrible and feel like a waste of time. Now, what is important though is that remember that with all of these things, everything is play. I think I got that from Geek Gamers, if I recall correctly, the Geek Gamers channel. I think everything is play, which means you can do those parts of play that you would just enjoy, right? So I knew somebody that kind of came to my college shortly after I did, but I met them because they hung out with a friend that I had who was still in college, right? So somebody that I hung out with that was a couple years younger than me, right? So he was there a couple years longer than I was, and so I met some of his friends. Um, and so one of them liked role-playing games and just liked making characters, just really enjoyed that process, right? So that's what they would do. They had a whole stack, right? This big stack of papers that was just character sheets they'd filled out, just creating character upon character because they enjoyed that process. There's nothing wrong with this, especially when you're playing as a solo RPG. Nobody says that you have to use every character you create. Come on, if you just like doing the process, then do that. Or in my case, I really enjoy in that Cepheus engine, which I've played on this channel before. I love their world creation or system creation rules. Right. So yes, are there online things? Have I sometimes used online tools? Absolutely, to do that. But at the same time, occasionally I do. I'm just in the mood to say, I want to create a world. That's the way it is. And that's perfectly fine, right? So My suggestion then, right, putting all of this together, is that it's worthwhile to think about why you want to solo roleplay, what you're hoping to get out of it. Um, and this might be something that you learn by doing, actually. Just sitting and reflecting about it, like you're, I don't know, like in therapy or something. Right? Oh, why did I do that? Right? No, you don't have to do this in this introspective way. Simply just be observant about what you are enjoying and what you are not enjoying as you make attempts at solo role playing. What are the things where you just get stuck? Because getting stuck can just be a sign that you don't want to do the thing. If you don't want to do the thing and it's a solo game, just don't do the thing, right? You can outsource it to somebody else, right? So if you don't like making those sector maps for Traveler or whatever, there are plenty of online tools that can do that for you, right? So take advantage of those, right? So find those elements that you like and enhance those. Find those elements you don't like and eliminate them. It's solo role playing. You can do what you want. I mean, that's not necessarily very practically helpful for most people because people often want to know kind of step by step what they're supposed to do, and simply saying do whatever you want is totally useless. I understand that. But at the same time, I think that it's important to also give yourself permission to do whatever you want. Well, within the context, of course, of the solo role-playing game. All right, so that is just kind of some thoughts here related to this about motivation and how that affects the game. I will say in my case, as somebody, one thing that I've learned because I have these simulationist tendencies, I like to explore. I like to be a seeker as far as that goes. What I'm trying to think of how to formulate this. One thing I've learned about that is that, for example, when I played Monster of the Week, like, yeah, it was fun, I guess, but that's about where I am. Like, I clearly understand what they're doing with the system. I like, in principle, what they're doing with the system, but it doesn't really match my style very well. And I know that Cepheus Engine does match my style really well. Right? So thinking about why it is these things are matching, I think is worthwhile. And often what you're going to find is that the game you're playing was really designed or have features that are designed for specific player motivations, and they're just motivations you don't share. And I think that's perfectly fine, right? So this is something then for you to keep in mind. So you sit down, you read a book, and then you try to play that particular game, and you love it, you hate it. Right, so you love it? Okay, now, good, good. So what did you love about it? So this framework that we get from brain hacks, Bartle, and GNS theory allows us to think about that question of why. So why is it that you enjoy the process of role playing, of solo role playing games specifically? Why is it that you want to get into it or do it more? Right, so asking those why questions and having this list of possibilities, I think, is helpful to us in deciding what to do in terms of how we set up our role playing games. So I think that's a pretty good place to stop. So this is Prof E signing out.